Okay, we are in the Tzidkas Hatzadik, Os Yud. And what I'd like to try to do today is do Os Yud and Yud Aleph instead of my usual spending 4 weeks on one Os. I'd like to spend 1 week on two Osios. Not because it's not important, but because it speaks for itself. So the Tzadok says as follows. Again, remember that Reb Tzadok is being mefarish the first Mishnah and the first Gemara in Brachos. And the Mishnah says, "May masai korin shema ba'arvis." So on this, the Gemara asks, Tana hechakoi, like, you start Shas with a question of a masai korin shema ba'arvis. What was he learning a minute before? He was asking the question, May masai korin shema ba'arvis, when do you read Krishma at night? First, maybe the Mishnah should have said you should read Krishma. You're supposed to read Krishma. That's already a halacha, which is not in Shas. And the Gemara says, one of the first answers in the Gemara gives a few answers, but the Gemara says, May masai korin shema Tana hechakoi. Where was the Tana holding when he asked this question? What was he busy with? Tana being Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So the answer is Akrokai. He got to the pasuk of you should read Kriya Shema every morning and every night. B'shachbacha uvkumecha. Okay, now that we're learning the pasuk of B'shachbacha uvkumecha, that you should read Kriya Shema at night and in day. So now he's asking his question, May masai korin shema ba'arvis, because that's really the first mitzvah that one has to do during the day. And then the Gemara says, why does he start with the night and not with the morning? So the obvious answer, which the Gemara says is only obvious to us because of this Gemara, is that the answer is because it says Vayihar Vayiboker. So Vayihar Vayiboker, and in the pasuk itself it says B'shachbacha uvkumecha, when you sleep and when you rise. So when you go to sleep and when you rise, Zman Shchiva, Zman Kima. So you see something very clear that the Erev is Kodem Liyom. So there's two Yesodis that we see in the Gemara. Number one is that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, it was important for the Gemara to tell that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was learning Psukim when he wrote this Mishnah, or redacted this Mishnah, Masadr the Mishnah. But it's also important that he put the night before the day, because that's exactly what the pasuk does. Vayihar Vayiboker. So says the Tzadok in Yud, Kol binyan limuda yia al hamikra shetziva Hashem. So first of all, we see a derech halimud, which I think is just very simple and very important. We see how a person is supposed to learn. And the way you start with is the pasuk, and then you ask yourself, this is what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi did, then you ask yourself, what is the meaning of this pasuk according to our tradition in Chazal? But the point is that the whole Mishnah is being mefarish psukim. It's not like a new thing, like there was a Torah Shebiksav, now there's a Torah Shebal Peh. No, the pshat is that the Torah Shebal Peh is coming to be mefarish the Torah Shebiksav. And when Hashem says to Moshe, Moshe, tell everybody to put on tefillin, and that's what you should write in the Torah. So Moshe Rabbeinu presumably, or may have asked the question, okay, but what are tefillin? And this is the way the Torah Shebal Peh begins and says, okay, tefillin, Moshe, are black boxes, and they have 4 parshios, and they have to be rabua, etc., etc. Halacha l'Moshe Mesinayu. All those things are halacha l'Moshe Mesinayu. So it means to say that the Torah Shebal Peh, in that sense, we're not talking now about the new Gzeirus of the Rabbanan or the new Takanas of the Rabbanan, but we're talking about, like, first thing you have to have in your vision is the pasuk, and then start with the pasuk and then go into Torah Shebal Peh. I think, by the way, the Torah Tamima, or Baruch Epstein, when he wrote a sefer, like he writes in the introduction, that the purpose of my sefer is to be makasher the Torah Shebiksav with the Torah Shebal Peh. here's the pasuk, and this is what Chazal say about this. But you don't have to go all the way to the Torah Tamima. That's what Rashi's doing. He's giving you the Jewish approach to this pasuk. But the chiddush here is that when a person learns, all of us, when we learn anything, kol binyan limuda yela mikra shetziva Hashem. Like, don't begin with the pasuk. What does that mean? It's not just like a nice way to learn, and it's a nice, chart or formation of how to learn. But I think what he means is because otherwise you're going to lose your way. Like, you can get so involved in migo and chazaka that you could forget. Like, this is what Hashem is being mefarish for us over here, and the Chazal are explaining a pasuk. And the Ikar is to do what the Torah says to do in the pasuk. So, like, I think it's a very spiritual thing to make sure that you're not losing your way. So he says, "Kol binyan limuda yal mikra shetziva Hashem." That should be like, put it on a poster and in front of you. This is the pasuk that we're learning now. You always have to ask that question. Who done? That's what you're trying to explore. What exactly did Hashem tell us in His Torah? That's all. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wanted to make this very, very point at the very beginning of Shas, the Pasach Mei Masai, where his question is, okay, but when? Like, when exactly do people go to sleep? When exactly do people wake up? How do we know when to say Krishma? Vatana, says the Gemara, Akrokai. The Tana was being mefarish a pasuk. The mefarish Gemara loy roy the whole mishnah say rak akrokai. It comes to teach us that everything Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was doing was giving us, and let me say it in my words, the Jewish approach to Tanakh, to Torah Shebiksav, because, like, as I always say, like, any group of people anywhere, they could be in India, they could be in Pakistan, they could be in America. Any group of people can take the Bible and say, okay, this is our Bible. We're going to live according to the Bible. It's not such a bad thing to do, but it doesn't mean that you have the secret and the code of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the Jewish explanation of the Torah. So when the Torah says "Lois sirtzach," don't kill, so the Mormons will take it literally, which is good. But we say, also included in that is don't embarrass somebody in public. There's a Torah Sheba'al Peh on Lois sirtzach. Also, kol amal b'mnei chaver b'rabim kilu shafach damah. So what's important here is what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was doing, and what we should all do is try to find the Jewish way of explaining the pasuk. So you can't, like, learning Chumash without Rashi is missing the Jewish part of learning Chumash. That's the Shnai Mikra of Echad Targum. Shnai Mikra of Echad Targum. V'loi kalimud chachma mechachmas. This is not like you're learning any other discipline or any other source of wisdom where you learn what you learn. Here, what we're learning is one thing, the pasuk. Okay, Meduma, it seems to me, says Reb Tzadok Shekach Shamati Gamkin, that I heard this Yesod from my Rebbe, the Izvich. Okay, so there's probably a lot to say about that, but I'm not going to say any more because I want to go to Yud Aleph, and I feel they're obviously connected. The Gemara goes on to say that why, in fact, does B'shach B'cha come before Uvekumecha? Why does the night Kriya Shema come before the morning Kriya Shema? So the Gemara says, Yalfinan mibriyase shel olam. We learn it out from the way the world created. And here we come into something which is very, very deep. And I just want to say, like, I always say this, and I don't mean to be offensive, but like, just blank your mind for a minute of all the different Vertelach that you know, and that's not the point here. Try to let's let Reb Tzadok speak to us. Yalfinan mibriyase shalayla, the bechol davar, in every matter, halayla koidem liyayim. Night always comes before morning. In other words, if Hashem created the world that way, it's not just that he created the original world that way in the Sheshis Yemei Bereshis, but it means to say that that's how the Bria works. The Bria works that you always have night before day, yes? That everything, the b'chol davar, if it's part of this Bria, if it's part of this world, the night comes before the morning. Another way of saying it, darkness comes before dawn. Another way of saying it is the negative comes before the positive. What you can't see comes before what you can see. Kehillas Shivtei, as the Gemara says. And why is this? So here says Reb Tzadok, Ki b'chol davar, because anything in this Bria, haheder koidem lahavaya. And here we come to some very important words, underlinable words. Haheder koidem lahavaya. Vacuum comes before existence. V'chi eshev b'choshech. When I sit in darkness, as Micha the Navi said, I will know that after this darkness, Hashem Orli, Hashem will create a light. Kikol chaye adam, because whenever it comes to life, murkavin me hazman, life is made up of time. Choshech va'or, there's a piece of darkness, there's a piece of light. Yom v'layla, day, night. Kach chozer chalila, and that's how the cycle of life and existence and creation goes. Raksha choshech, everything is a synthesis of darkness and light. Raksha choshech koidem, but we need to know that darkness comes first. Vayihi erev, vayihi boker. So it's not just the seder of the Bria, it's the seder of all Bria, that everything has in it, and these words are so strong, that everything is a combination or a synthesis of choshech and or, yom and laila. And in that, here's the secret that we know, I'm not sure everybody knows, Raksha choshech kodem introduces a new idea, de klipa koidemes lepri. So if you'll take a botanic example of this, so you'll see that the seder, until you get a fruit, you have to take a seed. The seed has to rot. It goes into the underground, which is pure choshech. And from that seed comes out.
We can ask a question.
Yeah, let me just finish the sentence. It comes out a stem. Stem comes out a flower. A flower comes out a fruit, and everything is destroyed on the way. And this is the idea, everything behind it gets destroyed, but you're not just going to have a fruit. The fruit has to be a result of the klipa. So it comes out that choshech always precedes or. That's just the way Hashem created the world, which I'll try to explain a little bit better. Yeah, Gil, what do you want to say? Gil, you there? Okay. Let's try to understand it in a deeper way. Like the simplest way to understand it is, okay, just go into shul. And if there isn't dust and destruction and a mess and less usable than it was 6 weeks ago, then you're not going to have construction. The simplest mashal of all this is that there has to be, every bria requires some type of harisa. You need to have some kind of, if you're going to take a piece of wood and make it appropriate, you got to cut the tree. You got to break the wood. You got to sand the wood, and you got to, like, the derech of biniyah is always harisa. So, next time we say Vayer Vayiboker Yom HaShishi, let's think about Yom Vayer Vayiboker. Yeah. I'm sorry, does anybody want to say anything about this? This is a extremely important issue.
I wanted to ask this. We find by Rishaim Shetchilatam Shava V'Sofam Misurim, and by Tzadikim the opposite. So the Rishaim, do they operate on the opposite midah of what we were talking about as far as the Bria is concerned?
That's a good question. Let's understand that there's, as Tzadok is going to go further to say, there's dark, there's light, and then there's dark again. So in a certain way, the darkness precedes the light, but then in other applications, we see the light precedes the darkness, like we say in Shachris every morning, Pasuk in Yeshayahu, Yotzer Or Uvarei Choshech. So it should say dark before light, but it's talking about once the morning has broken and you're already in the light of this world. So now Yotzer Or and Borei Choshech, and Choshech comes afterwards. But let me just stick with the first part for a minute. That the way the Bria works is Ein Avodah B'li Lichluch, as the Arabs like to tell me every day. Ein Avodah B'li Lichluch. The great Kabbalistic yesod that you're not going to have work without a mess. How does that work, and why is that, and what's the ramifications for us before we get to the next part?
Question?
Yeah.
Why it's surprising that he doesn't relate this theme to Ma'aser Bereshis, the first psukim in Torah. That would be seems to be the most central place for this to expound on this idea. He doesn't bring it in.
Yalfinon mebriase shalom.
But he doesn't relate it to the phases that are described in the psukim in the Torah.
That it says there was choshech and then there was or.
Not only that, but choshech apnei tahom.
There was choshech and then there was or. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I mean, you could go with what would seem to be the most compelling issue to a place to examine this would be to apply this to the stages that are in the first psukim in Bereshis.
Because the chiddush here, we all know that, but the chiddush is that not just that's how Hashem created the world in the beginning, Bereshis, but that's how the whole world is. In other words, from a physicist point of view, it's a different chiddush, and it's not that basic chiddush that Hashem created the world. He created night first, created day first, but it was ad kedei kach that he created night before day for all matter for all time. It's a different chiddush. Let me just give I just want to say something here to talk for a minute about something I don't know anything about. But the physicists like to talk about, they like to ask whether darkness is an absence of light or is darkness a thing unto itself. So l'chara, we have a pasuk Yotzer Or Uborei Choshech. The choshech is a bria. Even before the bria of Or, there was the bria of choshech. Atzilus, bria, yitzira, asiya. So choshech is a thing. So we don't have that question. Yotzer or uvarei choshech. But it's just interesting to my admittedly drop of understanding. The scientists speak about that there's really light and darkness also. It's just not visible to the eye. It's, in other words, the light that you'll find in darkness, physicists say this, and the light that you'll find in darkness is, outside of the visible spectrum to humans. And they talk about things like dark energy. So the chiddush of dark energy would be that, so Einstein spoke about this, that if we would be able to harness the energy of darkness, which is 68% of the world, or as he calls the vacuum, which is full of light particles, so that would, if we were able to find a source of energy from darkness, so all issues of energy would be solved. But the energy that we can see is from the sun. In other words, where the photons are such that they're visible to the naked eye and you can work with them. I mean, I know that there's, it's like you went to MIT, but I believe, didn't you? Yeah. I believe that even something as simple as, the remote on your TV, chas v'sholom, when you don't see a light emitting from it, it's infrared light. So in other words, it's below the spectrum of of human being able to see it. So how does it work? How do we know it's there? The answer is that's still at a madrega where you can see it with a camera. There are tools that you can use, equipment that you can use to see infrared lights and all those kind of ultraviolet, all these lights that are below the spectrum. They don't have enough photons for the human to see, but you see that it can turn on the television. You can change the channel with it. So I mean, but we're talking about much deeper in terms of dark matter, where the scientists say, and I'm only saying this as a mashal because I don't know enough about it to, nor is it the subject of the shiur really. But all I'm saying is that I think in most contemporary scientific thought or physicist thought, darkness is an element. So if darkness is an element, it gets back to what kind of an element. So the answer is yotzer or uvare choshech. That or is a yitzira. It's a very developed type of an element where you can actually see it and work with it and bend it and measure it. But the choshech is hard to measure. So, but it is a bria. Yotzer or uvare choshech. It's a bria that Hashem made. Okay, nachzer linyanenu, which is so important for this, we've gotten beyond the construction site, but we're talking about something different. That kol davar haheder, says Reb Tzadok, koydem lahavaya, that you need this vacuum, to create the light. It's not just that Hashem decided some reason when He created the world to create first night, then day. Let's do it that way, or make choshech and then or. But no, the or is actually a product of the warming of the elements in the choshech itself. To put it in like
could tov v'vohu precede even the darkness? In other words, could the sequence be, for instance, that existence was created and then darkness was created?
I think that's what the Ramban says as Pashut Pshat.
Mm-hmm.
The Ramban in the beginning of Torah, Pashut Pshat, the Olam Haisa Toyu V'Vayu, that was the element of Bria before darkness, even earlier than darkness. Olam Haisa Toyu V'Vayu. What was before? Ma Koydem Lo Olam, we don't know. The Torah doesn't report. about what
There's no
was
time.
before. No, right. Well,
That's a meaningless question.
It's no time, and it's yesh me'ayin. You know, it's ex nihilo. But what we can understand apparently is that you need this is so mind-boggling, and I'll show you how important this is. It's not just a philosophical or or scientific hakira, but it's that not only let's get the three steps here. Not only did the darkness come before the light when Hashem created the world, but when Hashem created the world, he created darkness before light and everything. But not only that, here's the third side, the light is a product of that darkness. Now wrap your brain around that. Like and that's the pasuk that he quotes, V'chi eshev b'choshech, I'm sitting in darkness, Hashem or li. It's exactly then that I can anticipate that light will be there. Nobody wants to sit in darkness. Nobody wants to sit in pain, which is darkness. Nobody wants to sit in a place of darkness, but the darkness is a necessary prerequisite for the light, but not just because, okay, Xeris HaKasav, why did Hashem do that? Like, why? But the answer is that there is no light without darkness. Not that you appreciate the light. There is no bria of light without darkness. There's no light without darkness.
You say it's the container for light. It's like a clean light.
So again, it's like black matter is more, might be more than a container. I'm not, maybe you're probably more of a scientist than I am, but black matter is more than a container. It's an element of the life, which is muravim zeh b'zeh. So the Balatanya in Chavav, which maybe I'll get to if we have time. The Balatanya talks about that kol havaya, everything in existence, hu taroivas or v'choshech. It's this mixture of darkness and light. I was talking to somebody yesterday. I was thinking the Gemara says we're going to talk about Rus and David HaMelech and Shavuos, but the Gemara makes a comment that just is an interesting horror. The Gemara makes a comment that you can't have a melech. You can't have a melech unless you have a kupa shel shrotzen oimid al gabav. Like he's got to have some type of skeleton in the closet, which the Gemara calls halavai was a skeleton in the closet. The Gemara calls it a kupa shel shrotzen. Like David HaMelech, kupa shel shrotzen. Now, I guess the pashut pshat in the Gemara is that like these kings, they got to be kept humble, and if they have a skeleton in the closet, so this is going to keep them, humble. Doesn't seem to work, but okay, that's the that's what the Gemara says. Perhaps a deeper shot in a kupa shel shrotzim is the sheretz is really like considered in Chazal the lowest part of chai in the bria, like the sheretz is. I mean, you have the domain, you have someach, but when you get to chai, so when you get to living creatures, so to speak, so the lowest is the sheretz. This creepy crawly things, and they're pretty disgusting, and they're pretty treif, and they're even matame. I mean, if it's tummy, right? You can't touch, if you're a Kohen, you can't touch a sheretz. So maybe the pshat is not only that it's a low bria, but if you don't have a kupa shel shrotzim, you don't have a melech, you don't have a malchus. Like, in other words, in order to ein memana melech alat tzibur, or even the Gemara says parnes alat tzibur, unless there's a kupa shel shrotzim, meaning that the or that you're being megala with this melech, the malchus, that you're being megala is niskala al yedei hasheretz. It has to start with choshech, it has to go through the process of choshech and then or. And that's maybe the pshat in why Rabbi Meir in his classroom was very busy with showing the Talmidim how to be Matayir Sheretz. And the, like, here's Rabbi Meir Balanes, standing in the yeshiva giving a shiur on the most tummy thing, holding it up and coming up with, according to the Gemara, that one of the Talmidim came up with, I think, 42 ways to be Matayir the Sheretz. So what is this exercise of being Matayir? Tosus asks, like what was the Isaac and Shtus for? Sheretz is treif. Sheretz is tummy. Tosus says, like, what was he wasting everybody's time for? But I think the deep part of it is that being Matayir Sheretz is not just being mal of the nitzitz of the Sheretz, but it's a process of Sheretz to Malchus. And it's dafka from a dark place that you can finally get some or, which Tzadok in a different place explains, and Zisel explains, that's why Rabbi Meir learned from Acher and from Elisha ben Avuya, something which he was very criticized for. But somehow or another, there's a process of darkness which can bring to light. But okay, the chiddush here is that the actual element of darkness is the beginning of creation of light. So, am I clear so far? It's very.
There's another parallel, perhaps. The mahalach of the Gemara is to go through all of the terutzim that are wrong, all the havaminus that are wrong before it comes to the final maskana, which is emes.
Also the derech of not just the Gemara, but every Dvar Torah in the history is to start with the question and then to come to an answer, which is not necessarily the derech of learning science or shar chachmas or like just say what you want to say, like what do you, like. But one has to bring out the klipa, break the klipa. That's the shaila utshuva, shailas utshuvas. But let me give you what I think is the most important example of this in Shas, and which you're all familiar with. Just maybe you didn't put it together yet. The Gemara says at the end of Makos, the famous Gemara, that was right after the time of Rabbi Akiva, was just shortly after the Chorban of the Bayis Sheni, and the Gemara says that the Gedolim were walking and touring the Harabayas. And when they saw they saw the fox run out, they all started to cry naturally. Like here was the most glorious place in Judaism. It's like fox walking around. Foxen don't go to a place unless it's desolate. So that's the greatest proof of its desolation. So they started to cry. And famously, Rabbi Akiva Mesachik, Rabbi Akiva laughed. I don't know what I'm going to put in it, but I always wanted to write a book called Rabbi Akiva Laughed. Amr Loi, so they said to him, Akiva mipnei ma'ata mesachik, what are you laughing for? So it's the wrong time to laugh. Tisha B'Av. Amr lahem mipnei ma'atem boichim. So he said to them, what are you crying about? Now this was a teaching methodology, just like Yitzchak is talking about. Okay, let's talk about it. Mipnei ma'atem bochim. He was the master. Let's go through the sequence. Let's hear. Mipnei ma'atem bochim. Why we cry? Malcolm Shikazaboy Vazar Akarev Yumas, that that it's too holy for a human to enter. Achshav Shualam Hilchuboy. Now we find, which we say in Eicha, right? Al Har Tzion Sheshamim Shalom, like it was Niskayim, the terrible Nevuah. Why Nivke? We shouldn't cry. So Amar Lahem, so Rabbi Akiva said, just think about how he taught. First of all, like you have to break the klipa, but just how he taught. Lakach ani mesachek b'diyuk zeh is exactly why I'm crying. Lakach ani masachek. D'chsiv va'idol li'edim namonim Asuria HaKohen v'Zachariah ben Yivarechya. It's pasuk in Yeshaya. I have good witnesses. I have Uriah, and I have Zachariah. So ask Rabbi Akiva, Uriah, Zachariah, in Uriah, it's Zachariah, Uriah b'mikdash Rishon. Uriah was the time of Yirmiyahu. Zachariah b'mikdash Sheni, Chag Zachariah Malachi, was the end of the Bayis Sheni. So what's he talking about? Zachariah. Elatola Kasam Nevuasha, so Zachariah ben Nevuasha shall Uriah. These words become, according to Reb Tzadok, these words take on a whole new light. That the Nevuah of Uriah, the Nevuah of Zachariah is totally dependent on the Nevuah of Uriah. Now there's a kasha here that, by the way, Uriah never said this. It's Micha said it. So Tosfos asked the kasha, but unimportant for us. He says, in the Zachariah, it says, "Oh, there will come a time that there will be elder people, men, women, sitting in the park in Yerushalayim and seeing children playing. And there'll be Simcha in Yerushalayim, Baruch Hashem, we get to see in our days. If there would not have been a Chorban bias, I would be afraid that Nevuah Zachariah will not happen. But now that we see the Chorban, we see Shualim Yalchubo, Biyadua Shenevuah Shel Zachariah Miskayemes. Now, I always say we're used to, a little bit of deep learning. Let's understand what he's saying over here, Rabbi Akiva. What Rabbi Akiva is saying is you're crying because of the darkness. I'm telling you that the darkness, to me, symbolizes the beginning of a process which will become light, because that's what happens even on a physical level. It's the darkness which becomes light. And what does it mean? I would never know if Zachariah is going to happen. Of course, he believed in the Nevuah. Rabbi Akiva was Rabbi Akiva. Of course, he believed in the Nevuah. But what he says is, if you look at the words carefully, he says, I wouldn't know that the process is moving, has even begun, if I don't see the darkness, because the darkness is the prelude to the light. So he says, you're crying over the current state of darkness, Shualim Yelchu Bam, and I'm laughing because I know this darkness is the beginning of the process of light. Because there ain't no light without darkness.
How did he know it and they didn't know it?
Rabbi Akiva.
How did Rabbi Akiva know it?
I don't know, but because he was a Talmud of Meir. But the reason I said I'd love to write a book about Rabbi Akiva laughed is the omek of a simple laugh of the Gadol Adar it'll take 2,000 years to understand his chuckle. It's just so deep. Let me say this, Rabbi Yitzchak, everybody, that the Gemara says, Ma hayat chilasai shel Rabbi Akiva. How did Rabbi Akiva get started? The Gemara tells the story. He was walking with his sheep. He was a shepherd. He saw a hole in a rock. He said, how can a hole get in a rock? He waited, he stared at it, contemplated it, saw a drop of water come from a mountain or something and fall onto the rock. made no dent in the rock, no visible dent in the rock. But he said, wow, this must have been happening for a few thousand years. And here the water made a hole in the rock, meaning that drop of water made the Grand Canyon, one drop at a time. And here Rabbi Akiva made his first Kal V'chomer in his whole life, which was famous for Kal V'chomer. Nasa Rabbi Akiva Kal V'chomer. So Rabbi Akiva made a Kal V'chomer. The shepherd made a Kal V'chomer. Ma even shu davar kasha v'ramayim shu davar rach. Here you have a hard substance like rock and a soft substance like water, and it's able to pierce through the stone. Kal V'chomer, a leyv shel basar, and the eish haTorah. That Torah is going to work to transform me. So what is it? Like Rabbi Akiva was the one that looked, and you find this in the Shita throughout Shas. Everything Rabbi Akiva says, and his Talmidim say, is you always have to look at the pakoach, not at the bepoel. You have to always look at the original matter, the thing, before you pass any halacha or understand any din. And he was sorry, you have to look at the not just the poel yotze, but the bekoach of the whole thing. And it's a shita of Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva understood that choshech is bekoach or. The bekoach of or is the bepoel, and choshech is the bekoach. I hope I'm being clear, because this is such a huge yesod. Let me just, before I end, there's so much to say about this and so many examples through Shas. Again, that it's not that you're never going to have or without choshech on some level. But not only that, the choshech choshech is the vacuum, and if you don't have a vacuum, then no light particles can come into it. And not only that, like you have to have a vacuum, but not only that, the vacuum itself, and as I say, like you can find this idea in science also, the vacuum itself is the Kehillas Shivtei Yeshurun. This is where, now how visible these photons will become and how usable they will become is remains to be seen of what Hashem is going to reveal in this world. But the Metzias is, and this is Rabbi Akiva was long before the scientists, but the Baal Tanya, the right one here, in Perek Chavav, it's like the Kutzker says, famously, that there's nothing as whole as a broken heart. Like it's like a doma lechita, it's like that seed that you put in the ground, that it doesn't reach any kind of shlemus until it rots. So you can't get to Rabbi Akiva. That was Rabbi Akiva was laughing about. And in the Baal Tanya in Perek Chavav talks about ruach nishbara leyv nishbar. David HaMelech said,
it's 10 o'clock.
Right there. Also, he brings on the pure strength from the Mari 9. Yisrain l'chachma min hasichlois ki Yisrain ha'or min ha'choshech. That wisdom comes from foolishness, just like light comes from darkness. Because choshech is a bria. You hear Philip. And when or comes, it's a mixture of or and choshech. The chashkus hachoshech, because there's a taiva for darkness, liskalala b'nahara, to be embraced with light, or to iskalala means to be synthesized. Or requires choshech in order for it to work. And it's the darkness which gives brightness to the light. Now you're going to appreciate the light. That's for kids. It is light. This is Zayar in Bereshis. That choshech has a taiva to embrace and liskalel, to be kolel in or. So Balatanya says that when we say, and here's the very practical, that everybody goes through, Balatanya Chavav speaks about how everybody goes through choshech in their life. I don't know anybody who's completely exempt from going through some kind of difficult periods and difficult times, and everybody's got their thing, But you have to look at the choshech. The Balatanya says, like Rabbi Kiva looked at the choshech, and it has the choshech is in itself painful and dark and needs to be recognized how difficult it is, and we need to help people that are b'choshech. But the fact is, the choshech not only means that there's an or coming, but it was actually a reason for laughter on the part of Rabbi Akiva. It was actually, if you could look at it like bekoach, like the water falling on the rock, it was actually like a deep thing. The Rabbi Akiva recognized that what we're seeing here is the ratius of the gula. I just tell you that the Tosfos, who comments on this sugya in Machas, at the end of Machas, so Tosfos talks about, like, is it a pasuk in Micha? Was it Uriah that said it? But his final sentences, Al korcha chai nevuah la'asid lavoi sharei avar bayis rishon, Tosfos says, va'avar bayis sheni, v'loi hoisat tchias hamesim. We went through the bayis rishon, went through the bayis sheni. We have no tchias hamesim, so there must be a bayis shlishi, and that Rabbi Kiva was talking about. V'Hashem yizakenu lirois Mashiach, amen, says Tosfos. Out of character, Rabbi Natan. Hashem should help us. Hashem yizakenu lirois Mashiach, amen. So on that note, I want to wish everybody a good Shabbos and a good Yontiv and Kabbalah Satorah B'Simcha. And Yirtzeh Hashem, next week, I think we should be back in the shul. Chaim, yeah? What do you think? I think next week we should be back in the show, unless Bezras Hashem we're not. We took on some other project besides, but the lights in Yirtzeh Hashem are supposed to go in today. Okay, Hatzlacha Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Rabbi. Thank you.
Moving back to Shiur, does that mean that the parallel is that the Torah is the choshech and the Torah Shabbat is the choshech and Torah Shabbat Peh is the or?
You mean the connection in the two Reb Tzadiks? I mean,
right.
So, yeah, it's true. First of all, like even more fundamental, but maybe a good example is the Machshachim Toshiveni Zugolus Bavel, and you see like the most developed Torah in history is Talmud Bavli. Most developed thought probably in history is Talmud Bavli. And that dafka came from what Chazal themselves called the Makam of Choshech. But something which doesn't have a gilui like a seed is called Choshech. Doesn't have the gilui. So Torah Shebiksav, without the gilui, is Choshech, and the gilui is or. And that's the ikar of Torah Shebal Peh is the gilui or from the first kernel of Torah Shebiksav, which is choshech in the sense that it's could be the or that we get out of Torah Shebiksav is because there's a certain amount of Torah Shebal Peh that everybody has, but be'etzem, it's the first kernel of Torah Shebal Peh, and that's why Reb Tzadok says in the previous paragraph that like keep that pasuk in front of you all the time. That's a pasuk.
But,
okay.
But the Torah Shabbat, the Talmud Bavli itself is called Choshech, though.
Came from Choshech.
But the whole pilpul, the shaklavataya, the whole confusion of it is the Choshech.
Yeah, but what was the outcome? In other words, that choshech that you can only have in Bavel, radiated an or, which is an eternal light. What's fascinating is, by the way, that Rabbi Yochanan, like already in Eretz Yisrael, in Tveria, Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish, so Rabbi Yochanan, when the Gedolim started to come back from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, he said, if you want to learn with me, you've got to forget Kol Teres Bavel. So, like, what's the okay? You can understand kind of psychologically, like you've got to forget all Teres Bavel because you did that. Meaning, let's not where you're coming to Eretz Yisrael. It's a new place to be, and it's a new way of thinking. And Talmud Yerushalmi is different. So you did that. You did the whole Bavel thing. 70 years you did that or more. All the way up to Rabbi Yochanan. Now, let's move to the place of or and come to the next step of development. That's the Rabbi Yochanan, because it was after the Chorban, after Rabbi Kiva, after Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, after everything, right? Now let's get some more. Okay, got to run. Sei gesund.